Hello, and welcome back to Educator.com's Introduction to PHP course. In today's lesson, we're going to be discussing the topic of typecasting, which is a way of converting variables of one data type to another data type. So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to first talk about something, a term called type juggling, which is something that PHP does, which is a way it automatically sort of converts items of variables of one particular data type to another. We're going to talk about typecasting itself, which is the actual process of doing that. And then we're going to talk about a couple of different common conversions, like when you cast or convert a variable of one data type to another, certain rules apply and certain things occur. And we're going to talk about some common cases for strings, for some arithmetic operations, and for converting things to Boolean values. So type juggling, what does that mean? Well, PHP is known as a weakly typed language. And then what that means is that when you declare a variable in PHP, you don't have to give it an explicit type. So when we do a equals 1, we're not saying to the compiler, or excuse me, to PHP that that a is an integer variable. PHP determines the variable's type from its context. So if we assign it an integer, it's going to be an integer variable. If we assign it a variable, a floating point number, PHP knows that b is a floating point number. This is different from strongly typed languages where, for example, in another language you might, if you want to declare a to hold an integer, you'd actually have to preface it with, like, for example, maybe the int keyword, which says that a is a data type integer. Now the thing about PHP is, because it's weakly typed, a variable can also change data types. Whereas in other languages, you might only be able to assign integers to a variable that's declared an integer. In PHP, if we have a equals 1, in the next line of code, this means this statement will say a is an integer that's equal to the value 1. We could, in the very next line, say a is equal to 2.5, and we've just implicitly changed the data type of the variable a. PHP now knows that a is a float data type, and it does that on its own. And because in languages, operations and functions require data of certain types to work, for example, numeric operators require numbers, the string concatenation operator requires strings to be its operands. Because they require that, PHP does what's known as automatic type conversion. In other languages that aren't weakly typed, you actually have to explicitly use, for example, if you're adding integers, you have to explicitly use two variables that are of the data type integer. In PHP, it does that for you automatically. If you try to add two numbers and they're not both integers, PHP does an automatic conversion for you. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the specifics of actually numeric conversions that it does. So if, for example, like when you add two numbers, it requires them to be numbers. If you provide in PHP two variables to an addition operator that are not numbers, PHP is automatically going to convert them for you to the appropriate type and then perform the operation. This automatic conversion is known as, what the lesson is titled today, typecasting. And that's basically converting data from one data type to another. Because this happens automatically in PHP, PHP has certain rules that it follows when it does this, and they may not be that obvious. So it's important that you understand the automatic casting rules that PHP uses so that you can get expected results. So typecasting, as mentioned, is the process of changing a variable from one data type to another data type. This can be either done implicitly, as in automatic type conversion, where PHP converts the data type for you, or you can do it explicitly, where you can explicitly say, I have a variable that's an integer, I want to make it a float. There are two ways to explicitly cast a variable from one data type to another. You can use parentheses syntax, which we're going to talk about in a second, or the setType function. So for example, if we have a variable here, int1, that's set equal to the integer value, integer literal 1, and we want to make that a float variable. What you can do is we can create a new variable called float1, and what we do is we set it equal to the integer variable name, and then what we do is we have parentheses with the word float in between them. And what that means is this parentheses segment right here says take the value of int1 convert it to a float, and then assign it to float 1 over here. Set type does a similar thing, except in the way set type works is it's a function that has what are known as it has 2 arguments, which we're going to learn more about when we learn more about functions. But for right now, you can just know that basically you write set type and then a pair of open and closed parentheses, and then you pass it two pieces of data. You pass it the variable you want to cast, in this case num. We're going to cast a variable num, and then you pass in a string that says what you want to cast it to. So what this operation is going to do is cast the variable num, which maybe is an integer, to a Boolean. So it's going to change it from a number data type, like an integer data type, to a Boolean data type. Now, one thing to note is that when you use parentheses casting, as up here, it doesn't permanently change the data type of the object or of the variable that it's casting. So when this operation here completes, I'll clean this up a little bit. So when this statement right here completes, int 1 is still going to be an integer. It's just its value was converted to a float before it was assigned to float 1, but int 1 is still an int. If you use the set type function to explicitly cast it, it actually changes the type of the variable specified. So this is essentially the same as if we had used parentheses form. So whereas up here, the variable to the right of the cast in parentheses, its value data type doesn't get changed. Down here, because we're assigning it back into the same variable name, its data type does get changed, and that's what the set type function does.